You're listening to the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe, a podcast of curated conversations with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development. Get ready for inspiring interviews, educational lessons, and thought-provoking discussions that will challenge you to execute something new and innovative that will drive results in your organization. And now, here's Dr. Tanya Lowe.
You're listening to episode 34 of the Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Using my results-driven philosophy of strategy, leadership, teams, and customer experiences, I help organizations develop their best-kept secret, their human capital. This podcast is designed to expand the conversation with C-suite leaders and those who support organizational growth and development and what it really takes to create, develop, and maintain results-driven and high-performing organizations. Our guest today is Jennifer Kim. Jen, CEO of MasterBrand Institute. She is a San Francisco Bay Area-based branding and marketing expert who gets entrepreneurs seen, heard, and paid for being themselves. Isn't that what we all want? She's the creator of the MasterBrand Method, a framework to develop powerful brand archetypes that win customers' hearts, leveraging Jennifer's 17 years of corporate experience and her launching of multiple companies. She uses the MasterBrand Method in digital strategy for celebrity brands like Oprah Winfrey Network and Steve Harvey, and major corporations including Verizon, Blue Cross Blue Shield, and Bank of Hawaii. What she's most passionate about in her work today is her legacy project, Femmefluence. I am so tongue-tied today. Femmefluence is a platform that supports women leaders to fully rise into their influence and affluence so they can make an even greater impact in the world. Surprising fact, Jennifer built a retail business and became a millionaire at the age of 32, only to lose it all in the recession 2 years later. She is now the successful owner of $3 million brand building businesses and the mother of 3 children. She's also my friend and my coach, Jen Kim. Welcome to RDO.
Dr. Tanya, I am so pumped to be here and to finally reconnect, and just being in your energy and your genius makes me happy.
Well, I'm so glad that we get to play together. And before we jump into our full discussion, I want to ask you about something you posted because I think it's relevant to our conversation, as well as something that many of our listeners deal with, as well as in corporate, our corporate clients, they deal with it. And it's around teams. Mm-hmm. You posted, and I quote, "I gotta say, my team is so next level. It took a while to get into formation, but now we feel unstoppable. Hashtag unicorn team." Yeah. I know you learned some lessons from that. Can you share with us some of the challenges and lessons to get to this point? And how did you know that you were there?
Yeah. So, well, first and foremost, I am really excited because 2023, which is the timing of this particular episode, we all are post-pandemic, right? And we had to shift a lot of things from a team perspective. And it made us look at our offers. Mm-hmm. It made us look at the way that we had processes to make those offers happen. We looked at how we were interfacing with each other and what we liked and didn't like, and how could we create this hybrid organization? Because before 2020, we worked together. It was all local. We all worked in an office together. And that was really important to me because I do feel ultimately that you just get more done when you can really not just hear, but see the body language and feel that, I call it like this generative energy that teams mm-hmm. can create to make mm-hmm. things happen. So that was the biggest bummer for me in the pandemic, besides the isolation from everyone else. Yeah. So anyway, I think in the past 3 years, since we've been past that, it's like finding our rhythm and asking ourselves, what works and what doesn't. Because what happened was, because of the pandemic, some of my key team members, leaders on my team they moved away, they moved out of California. And it was a question of, should we, release that, or should we find a way back because they were so awesome to begin with? And I think that when you find somebody who is, or people who are great, they have the right attitude, and definitely they have skills, working towards a way to make it work is important. So what I learned is that being flexible, because it was very important for me to have key conversations in person, like especially strategic conversations. Execution, I always trusted to the executors, right? My job as CEO was always to cast vision and bring in any strategic insights that I had. But from an execution perspective, I always trusted the people that we had on our team, and I still do. But I always said, like, that relationship between vision and execution is strategy, and strategy is the glue between vision and execution. And I really believe that helps give the context and the perspective that executors need, because executors, I call them mobilizers. Mobilizers are people who they love accomplishment energy, right? That's their thing, accomplishment energy. They want to feel like their tasks are done, that they're at inbox zero, that like anything that's due is like due. Whereas visionizers and strategizers, which are like, the CEOs and the people who run marketing, they tend to, visionizers definitely, they're more about like, is the future happening? Am I driving towards something that is making us belong in the future? And then strategizers are about the results. So I love that, you teach and consult on results driven companies. That's the strategizer's job, is results. And results don't happen without the translation between vision and execution. So what we learned is that we could do that by, every 3 months, it's like mandatory for us to get together. In fact, we're going to tomorrow. And that has just been great, because I realized that all I needed was that. And the rest of the time we could organize our strategy in a hybrid way. And so that was really big. And we built a process around it. I'm actually writing about it in my upcoming book, Unicorn Team. That's why I hashtag Unicorn Team, because that's what I call a team that is values and results driven. We're all looking, a lot of times the unicorn is thought of as the visionaries types of people, and then the $1 billion brands that exited out of startup. Then I said, actually, unicorns are the people behind the brand. I really believe that brands are built from the inside out. And the 3 roles that I mentioned, the visionizer, the strategizer, and the mobilizer, are the key roles to organize your team around. And so it's organized around roles, not people. And because of that, we've been able to use that model inside of our company, test it out. And now I feel, and we've now been also putting it inside of our clients, whether they're corporate or entrepreneurial, basically it's working. So, because I think we were all looking for a solution to people enjoying the autonomy of hybrid work or working from home. But I do believe that most people want to hang their hat somewhere. They want to hang their hat somewhere. And so we were trying to find a way for that flow to work. And so those are some of the things that we learned and we've applied to become our own unicorn team.
I love it. Trust, time together. Who are the executors on your team? Many of the clients that I work with, and just kind of perusing LinkedIn, many people are still struggling with how do I work with this new reality of virtual teams, hybrid workforce. Can we trust them? I know right at the beginning of the pandemic, my neighbor was like, she worked for a large insurance company, and she said we would get on Zoom for 8 hours just so people could make sure that we were doing what we needed to do, which really kept us from doing what we needed to do.
Wow. So, that feels like totally the opposite, I think, of what teams need to feel.
Absolutely. I mean, and you said it, it's trust, if you hire people you don't trust, then they shouldn't be there.
exactly.
They shouldn't be there. I hear that all the time. I can't go on vacation. I can't trust that things are going to get done. Well, either you didn't hire right, or you didn't develop them well, or you didn't put them in a situation where they could develop in order to handle things when you're not there. So a lot of room for growth. So thanks for sharing that. I can't wait for unicorn teams to come out, because I think I know a lot of organizations are going to need it. So you're a branding and marketing guru. You work with a lot of entrepreneurs, but you have a pretty extensive background and experience working with corporate. So, so I know that a lot of what we talk about today will be, if you're an entrepreneur listening, you will definitely be able to take, there will be takeaways for you, and definitely our corporate listeners, tune in, grab a pen, make sure you replay this episode, because there's going to be some things here for you to help you become a results-driven organization. So here we go. Let's talk about the relationship between branding, leadership, and organizations, because I think when people hear the term branding or brand, they think, oh, that's colors and websites and photo shoots, but it's so much more than that. So, so it's a two-part question, but I want to start with that. Can you just kind of explain to us the relationship between branding, leadership, and organizations? And then I'll give you the second part in a minute.
Great. So there's some context I want to say first before I even answer it, is that society and work, right, tends to compartmentalize ideas. And one of the big lessons that I learned when I was in corporate, because I was in corporate for over a decade, I left the corporate world as a senior executive at Verizon. My last launch was launching streaming, which is now known like by Netflix and Hulu, back in 2006. So I like to say I'm a seasoned chicken, not a spring chicken. And when I jumped out of corporate and started my own consulting business, what I realized is, whether you were an entrepreneur or you were leading a team in the corporate space, the rules were not different. Okay. The only difference was, as an entrepreneur, you had to make decisions faster. You didn't have the ability to waste time, energy, or money. And I'm not saying anyone should do that in the corporate world, but there's more process, there's more resources, there's just more things. But in terms of the mindset and the thought process around, how to get good things into the world, which is basically what a brand's job is, right? A brand is two parts. There's the front end, which is how the world sees the brand, right? And those experiences that the brand creates through using the product, through advertising, through activations, right? That's what the front end of the brand is. The back end of the brand, which a lot of people don't usually associate with brand, they call it culture, which culture is brand, right? That is the back end of the brand. The people are the culture is the brand. And so people continue to buy a brand or are loyal to brands because they are getting an experience that is consistent, right? So even when a brand messes up, and brands will mess up because humans are in charge of brands, is that there's some way for them to be forgiven because of the back end. It's not the front end that keeps them there. It's the back end that creates that loyalty. And that's what Unicorn Team is about, and why I think it's so important, why it's not a radical idea. It's just an idea I think needs to be clearer. So that the back end is the brand too. Like we call that biz ops usually, and it is biz ops, but there's a way that if biz ops thinks of themselves as brand ambassadors inside of the company, right? That their part in it is not just mechanical or operational, that it's actually an opportunity for the external, value of the brand to be enhanced. That's where you see great brands emerge. Because I also want to say that every single entrepreneur that we admire, whether it's Steve Jobs or Sarah Blakely, they have big companies now, huge, right? Yes. Behemoth, billion-dollar brands, right? But they all started in the same place that the founder of IBM did, the founder of Ford Motor Company. So like every big corporation was founded by an entrepreneur. So that's why the fact that we separate them is, I think, one of the biggest problems on the corporate side and the entrepreneurial side. That on the corporate side, that they think of themselves as intrapreneurs, that they have this entrepreneurial mindset, right? And then on the entrepreneur side, that they start thinking and using corporate structures that actually will help them become more organized and better in the marketplace. And that if we talk to each other like that, there would be more innovation and excellence. So, to me, that's the relationship between organization, leadership, and branding, is that cohesion versus separation of these ideas.
I love that. I love that. And I don't think we talk enough about or hear enough about entrepreneurship and how we can come together and work together and take the components of both worlds and combine them regardless of the environment that you're in.
Yes.
I was helping some students prepare for some job opportunities, and one of the job descriptions said they were looking for people who had an entrepreneurial mindset. And so I think it was a startup company, but right, and it's a corporate company, but a startup, and just kind of the mindset that they want them to bring, to be able to move faster, to think faster, to not get bogged down with a lot of the ideas that I know coming from government and corporate and academia, we can get bogged down with those things.
Yes. And it's important, because I also say, like, people think of entrepreneurship, they romanticize entrepreneurship, and like, yo, it is not romantic over here. Okay.
Oh, it's not.
Right. It requires a different type of discipline. Right. And those disciplines are architected in corporate. You are under them. Corporate and government, you must follow the rules, basically, right? There are structures that you can play in. Versus entrepreneurship, it's like people think it's the wild, wild west, and it can be, but those are the businesses that don't succeed.
Yeah.
Okay. The businesses that actually succeed are the ones that understand that entrepreneurship and intrapreneurship are the way to build a brand and build better leaders, having leaders thinking about their own team around, who's innovative, being able to listen to contrarian views, and know how to manage those. That's, to me, the greatest opportunity in leadership today, because especially, like, I don't know about you, Tanya, I'm not trying to age us, because I think aging is actually really cool, but we're Gen X.
I do too.
Gen X. Okay. And I think so, right? You're Gen X. Is that correct?
Yes, okay. Absolutely.
And so when we're gone, I don't know what's going to happen in the world. That's why I'm writing part of this book, because I don't believe that the principles of leadership change even with technology advances. Like, let's face it, AI's been here forever. We invented AI, FYI. Okay. Like, Gen X invented AI. We invented the idea of expert-based learning and all of that. And we changed and shifted the way even like traditional leadership happened. We're the ones who created the hybrid work environment. That environment was here, the 4-day work week and wearing khakis on Fridays. Way before. This was the 90s. And so that's why I also, if you're listening in corporate to this episode, what I hope that's landing is that this is not new. So instead of thinking we got to dive to the next idea, where can we, again, look for cohesion, integration, understanding that people are people are people? The only thing that we need to really understand is that the younger generation, so the Gen Zs, right, who are going to be the majority of the workforce very soon.
Right.
They never grew up in a world where they had to pick up a phone, read a dictionary, get encyclopedias,
write a letter,
go to the library and look through the file, like the Dewey
Decimal System.
Like all of those things, right? Their entire lifestyle is putting a query in Google. And, that's something we can't fight. But as leaders, back to branding, okay? That's why I think brand is so important, is that thinking of it as like, what's going to matter to these individuals that's going to keep them loyal? Because in a world where an 18-year-old can make millions of dollars on YouTube, what would make them want to create the next great brand with a big company? And as leaders, we need to be thinking about that, or if we are not already thinking about that, because they have choices now, right? And that's good. That's good. It's going to flatten some things out. But the companies that want to thrive and survive and still be seen as a master brand, as I like to call them, they've got to consider these things and start to ask themselves, how can we make these individuals feel like they're part of a bigger mission and vision for real? Because the younger folks, they don't trust the values that are written on the website. If they don't align internally, they're not feeling it. And they don't have the same fears that we did. Like, we wanted job security. We wanted, all these things. We wanted a pension, even a 401k. Now these younger folks are like, I can create money in a lot of different ways.
Yeah.
And they're valuing freedom and autonomy a lot more. So again, we could talk forever about this because I get excited. But
I know.
Again, what I hope lands is, like, as leaders, those are the concepts I think we need to focus on. And again, see the inside our company as a brand, not just the outside.
Yeah. So in that same vein, how does branding influence leadership decisions and organizational success? And I think you've already kind of started going there, but for those who are like, I don't get it, how does it influence leadership decisions and organizational success when you really look at combining thought processes, when you look at aligning your mission, vision, and values with the people for real. You want to start living it. What can leaders do to influence that?
So let me share an actual thing that we do in our company that a lot of clients have adopted, just because they're like, that's cool. We never thought of doing it that way. And it's the performance review process. Okay. So, not many people look at the performance review process and go, ooh, first of all, they don't think of it as a brand thing. And they definitely don't think of it as something fun and sexy to look forward to, right?
Everyone hates it.
Right. And everyone is like, I don't know about you, but in the corporate world, I was always striving for a 5, right? And then there was a quota of how many 5s you could give. And that felt unfair, right? And all the things. And so when I started my own companies, I started to ask myself, how can I make my team think of themselves as brand ambassadors? Okay. And the way that I figured that out was, what I needed a tool. I was like, I need a tool that will help me measure that, because we do need to measure things. If you want, results are about not just the finances, but also the health of the company in terms of retention, how people see the company, being able to attract top talent, all of those things. And so I was like, okay, performance reviews, great. And typically, at least where I came from, the values of the company and your direct contribution in terms of your title and your job was part of the performance review. Well, anyway, what I realized is that what I wasn't doing, and I wanted to test it out, was find out what the individual values of my team members were, like their personal values. Okay. And I started, just to give credit to the first, I would say, mentor. He doesn't know it because he's never met me, but in my mind, like, studied Dr. Joe DiMartini's work. He wrote this book called The Values Factor. And in the book, it made me connect the dots between individual performance and company performance. He wrote it more from a personal development perspective, but I saw it from a professional development perspective, because I actually think professional and personal development are the same. Like,
absolutely. I was going to say it's a thin line between the two.
Right. Great leaders lead themselves, or learn how to lead themselves first, and then they can lead others better. But I feel like, so what happened was, I was like, hey, so I did the process of the values determination with them. And this is DiMartini's work. He calls it the values determination. And it was life-changing for my team, and it was life-changing for our company. Because even after the pandemic, I did it before the pandemic, but after the pandemic, it was a reminder of what really mattered to them can play into the company. If I can help them connect the dot between our values and vision, and then their values and vision for their life, and I can actually create metrics and goals around that, we might have something here. And I can tell you, I'm really proud of the fact that my core leadership team, we've been together for 9 years, and that is unheard of.
It is totally unheard of.
Totally unheard of. And I don't want to be an outlier. I guess that's the other thing I want to say. I was like, I don't want to be the only outlier here. It's not just because of my leadership, although I really pride myself on just trying to be a better human being and a better leader. But it's because they really see their personal values lined up with the company's goals. Mm-hmm. And now when we onboard people, that's the first thing that they get is like, we want to know your personal values. And they're like, what's this? And
because no one's ever asked them.
Yeah.
Nobody's ever asked them.
We keep, it's like church and it's church and state.
Church and state, right?
It's like, hey, we don't care about your personal lives. And again, by the way, I remember I was getting into a little bit of a heated debate with this guy on a panel around it, because he was like, if we're always kowtowing to our team's needs, we're never going to get results. And I said, I see it a different way. Mm-hmm. I see it as there's still accountability, right? Mm-hmm. But that, hey, maybe the rewards they get could look a little different. For example, like I'll tell you, my COO, she loves to travel, but she just won't spend her money on herself to travel. Mm-hmm. And so I started increasing the ability for her to like send her whole family to Disney World, in addition to her bonus potential, things that would reward the things that she would never do for herself. Right. Yeah. And it's made her go, wow, this is a place that I can be with my family. We can do fun things together, and I can focus on my work, because she loves accomplishment energy, because she's a COO. She's a mobilizer, right? So she likes to finish things. And so anyway, I don't think just because you're because I call it being values driven, means that you're not results driven. Financial results are absolutely critical to a company's health. But if you want to retain and attract top talent in today's world, especially if you're the CEO of a small business, this is extremely important, because we get the people who corporate doesn't want. And I know that sounds, you know what I mean? They're nonconformists,
but they're rock stars, right?
Right.
They're rock stars.
And how are you going to be able to pay those guys if they were a product manager or project manager in corporate, they would make 6 figures guaranteed. And in the beginning, you can't afford that.
Yeah.
This is the way you get them, is this values driven idea that I outline in Unicorn Team. And so I hope that helps answer the question. We literally live this, so our performance reviews align both the company goals and the personal goals of the person. And then we do our best to try to achieve it. And then I just want to say one more thing is that I said the word accountability earlier, but we actually don't believe in accountability in my company. We believe in ownership. That's back to brand ambassador stuff. So accountability means that managers are giving you things that you have to obey. Okay. And instead, our culture is about ownership. So if I own this goal, I'm the owner. I own the outcome. I own the goal. I own the communication that's necessary to get the goal done. I own the work that's necessary instead of accountability. And that is the hardest for the mobilizers, because they like checklists and they don't like ambiguity at all. And I'm like, the clearest thing I need you to understand is that I'm trying to make you a more strategic mobilizer, because that's what companies need more than just pencil pushers.
Yes.
And this is also why people can't use VAs overseas effectively, and they get frustrated because they don't understand that context matters and that we all need to own that communication. We all need to own that outcome.
We're responsible for it.
Yes. So that's also a big difference that we have.
Something that you said there before I go back to something else you said, the World Economic Forum put out a report in 2020 saying that employees were going to need to be 50% of the workforce would need to be upskilled and reskilled by 2025. And so one of the things that, of course, there's technology things, emotional intelligence, soft skills, but one of the things that showed up on the list from 2020 and again for 2025 was critical thinking. And so people always ask me, well, how do you teach critical thinking? Can you teach critical thinking? Yes, you can. You can teach it by giving them ownership. You can teach it by giving them experiences, giving them an opportunity to break it, because they're not going to break it, but to learn from that.
I love that you said that.
As you were talking about ownership over accountability, guys, it's really changing our language, because if I own something, I'm going to make sure that it's fed, it's watered, it has everything it needs, because at the end of the day, my name's on it. I own it.
Yes.
And I love how you put that out there, ownership over accountability, and then creating opportunities within organizations for people to truly take ownership. And I think it goes back to what you said. It's the culture. It is, and that the back end part of the brand. Yeah. I hope you guys are getting this. I hope you're getting this. Values driven does not mean you're not results driven. So Correct. For those of you who are really thinking that, we're getting too soft in the workplace. Listen, there are 5 generations in the workplace right now. And people have different needs. And so as a leader, we have to learn to meet those different needs in the workplace. John Maxwell used to say it all the time. If you help people get their needs met, they're going to help you with your stuff. So
I mean, empathy and excellence can exist in the same sentence.
Yeah.
Okay. And I think you're right. I mean, whether we like it or not, because Gen X, we're pretty hardened. You know what I mean? We're like, we worked. You know what I'm saying? So some of the stuff we're like, okay, I'm not going to lie. Like sometimes with the other generations younger than us, I get a little frustrated. I'm not going to sit here and pretend like I get it. But this tool that I mentioned, this process helps me remind me that their needs are different, like you said. And therefore, but it is also my responsibility to let them know this is our fiduciary responsibility. The money part is not negotiable. Okay, meaning this is the number we need to make. And inside of it, if I give you some autonomy and I trust you and we're clear, then if we don't make that number, each one of us owns it. Versus, okay, you own that part and I own this. I have accountability for this part. And I think that's a big problem. So again, I hope that is landing, that I am in no way trying to say that we should be quote unquote softer. I'm saying that we should align and really do what we say. If our values are X, then let's live that as a company and then tie it to people's personal values. Because it's psychology. People only care about themselves ultimately, right? And so if we start realizing that, then, we'll have better results.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So in that vein of preparing a workplace that people can thrive in, how can branding influence an organization's ability to attract and retain top talent? Everyone wants the top tier of talent. They're struggling with finding them. What roles do employers play? Does branding play in talent acquisition?
Well, it's interesting because, even when you think about building a personal brand, people think of it as being someone who wants to be a social influencer or whatever now. And I'm like, actually, building your personal brand as a corporate ambassador is just as important. If you choose the corporate life, which I feel that's a really noble thing. I mean, we can't have everybody wanting to be entrepreneurs or nothing would get done, So it's like, what we want is people who are trying to develop their personal brands as whatever they want. We want to attract those people who are interested in being top tier CEOs and C-level employees. We also want to attract people who enjoy being specialists, right? And they're not interested in management. They're not interested in leading people, but they're interested in say you're an engineer, computer scientist, accountant, some of them just desire to have that. And so in attracting top talent, even having that clarity of like, we are looking for these types of people who actually know that they want to be the best at what they want to be at. And we are creating an environment whereby you can do that. So I think companies have to live their culture more. They have to communicate their culture more. I think the CHRO position is one of the most important positions today, which is, the head of human resources. And it became very important during the pandemic.
Absolutely.
I think before that, it felt more like an administrative role, a protection role agency inside of a company. And now I think that the CHRO role is to show off the brand so that they can attract top talent. They have to learn how to position the company as a great place to hang our hat. And so so it's interesting because I see a lot of CHROs now learning sales and marketing, because they are learning, ultimately, sales is just enrolling people into whatever you want them to be part of. And you're enrolling potential talent to come to your company. Your company becomes the product, right? And so all of us have to be thinking that way. And so that's what branding really is the ability to enroll people into the mission, vision, and values, right? And so the same thing we do to consumers, we should be doing to employees or staff. And I think that's what makes me different. That's how I always look at companies, and always have. And I think that's why I was so successful in the corporate world. I like to say this for you listening, is that I should have never been an entrepreneur. I should have never been an entrepreneur. And the only reason I'm successful is because I was in corporate first. I believe that. And you don't want to lose great people. I say this with so much humility, like me, right? Like, I never thought I'd be an entrepreneur. I thought I was going to be CEO of Google one day, or a high-tech company. Right. And I was on that path. And the only reason I became an entrepreneur is because they violated my values. That's also where that came from. This idea of being values driven is like, I got passed up for a promotion that I was promised. And I realized in that moment that, and I'm a very practical person. I had 2 young children to feed. I don't have that sexy entrepreneurial story, like where I say F you and jump off the cliff. That was not what I did. I took 9 months to strategically plan my exit and to not burn bridges, which I think a lot of people don't do either, which they should. And this is back to retention and loyalty, is like, it didn't feel fair. And I realized that all that time I thought my top value was ambition, because I wanted to, be mobilely upward. But really, I realized, no, autonomy and justice are my top values. It didn't feel fair what had happened. And I realized too that I wasn't playing the game right, because who got promoted over me while I was working my tail was my colleague who played golf with my boss every weekend. And I have nothing against them. I just want everybody to hear that. They're both my friends still. They learned a hard lesson though, because they lost a top tier staff member, an executive. And guess what? Now that company is my client. They've been my client for over 10 years. And I became a consultant and made a lot more money than I was as an executive. And I'm not trying to tell y'all to leave and become consultants. What I want you to hear is that I would have preferred to stay. That's the thing. And I think people sometimes prefer to stay. They don't want to leave, but we're driving them out because we're not understanding their personal values and why they even choose to work harder. I was happy to work. I love working. I actually enjoy it. I enjoy getting results. Again, I'm a strategizer thinker. So it's like, I like results, and it makes me a better mother. It makes me a better wife because I enjoy my career. I could have been that in corporate too. You're always going to deal with irritating people. You're always going to deal with irritating process. Everywhere. You're always going to deal with red tape. Those are all real things. But if you personally can get in alignment with what you want to get out of life, those are the people we want to hire. And if we teach them that from the get, from when they step in the door in the onboarding process, we will have a whole different experience of retention and loyalty. And they will tell others to come work for you. They will tell their friends.
They will tell their friends.
They will tell their friends. Yes.
They'll tell their friends, yes, come. No, don't come here. You don't want to come here.
Yes, exactly.
And that says that there's a problem with your brand. Live your culture. Go back and pull that mission and vision statement out. If people don't feel that when they walk in the door, there's a problem somewhere.
Yes, that's a real problem.
Think of your company as a product. I know in one of our executive roundtables, one of our execs from a company out in Dallas said, and this is kind of right, well, 2021, that they were in bidding wars. They were struggling with finding talent, having to be in these bidding wars. They think they're getting ready. Yeah, we got somebody. And somebody else would come and swoop them right out from under their feet, and oftentimes they thought, Jen, that it was more money, but it actually wasn't. It was their culture. It was this company, their values aligned more with my values.
Correct.
And so that's what people are looking for today. And I think, leaders, if you're an old school leader like myself, you got some unlearning to do.
Yes,
and it can be done. We've got to unlearn a lot of those things. One of the things I had to stop saying is, well, we didn't do that in my day, or I never would have done that. Well, I'm not in my day anymore. I'm in a new day.
Right.
And I believe that there's value from every generation. Every
100%
generation adds value to the workplace. But I think every generation needs to be heard and appreciated and valued. And that makes for a great place to work.
Yes. Even during the hard times, it makes people remember why they stayed. And that's because, again, I don't want to create some utopia here where even this unicorn idea will change everything, but it'll change enough, I believe, that people will understand their part to play in that ownership of the bigger brand and the bigger picture. And I love what you said about that it's not just all about the money. Some people just want, even again, safety and security. If that's a top value for someone, instead of going, oh, that's a bad value. There's no such thing as a bad value. There's only aligned values, right? That's the other thing. I don't want values driven, from my perspective, to sound like, oh, it's only like for good-minded people. No, everybody has their own value system. The question is, does the value system fit the values of the company? That's how you find out, right? Like, it's true in politics, it's true in work, it's true in personal life, it's true everywhere. So why wouldn't we apply it to business and recruiting and retention? It doesn't make sense to me.
It doesn't. So, in that vein, corporate social responsibility has become increasingly important for organizations. We've heard, especially during the social injustices of 2020, everyone, they have their corporate responsibility letters, or they didn't write one, or, different things are happening in the organization. How can leaders integrate corporate social responsibility initiatives into their brand strategy to make a positive impact, or is that even necessary? Do they need to even think about doing that?
I like to use an example of a brand I think most people are familiar with, Patagonia. Patagonia was doing this before 2020 in terms of their clarity around the social initiatives that mattered the most to them. So, for example, in 2020, Patagonia did not issue this big, wide statement around DEI, diversity, equity, inclusion. They focused more on climate and the environment because that's their brand, right? But they said they did make a statement, but they didn't make this widespread statement. And some people said, oh gosh, Patagonia, they're only thinking about this when this is the issue of the moment, right? And what Patagonia's response, very leaderly like, I think, is they said, absolutely, we stand for, equity, inclusion, diversity, justice. We are a stand for that. And the way that we stand for it is our hiring practices and our desire for all people to live on an earth that they can breathe air, that they can. And so they tied it to their brand promise. And that's what consumers and staff are looking for. They're looking for, are we actually living that value, that brand, while still being cognizant and empathetic to the current climate of let's say politics or social initiatives. And so Patagonia is a great example of a brand that didn't lose brand equity as a result of them not being, jumping on the bandwagon. And I think that's the other thing is like younger folks, and that's, when I say younger, generations below Gen X, they are looking for authenticity. And I know that word is just so overplayed, but now look at the companies there's a lot of controversy right now where it's like now that the Supreme Court, shot down, equal employment, right? Or, that now companies their DEI heads of staff are being fired. They don't need them anymore because they don't have to put that fake saccharine-like position that they never were committed to begin with. And I think that's what people are looking for. And so the question I have is, again, because I get financial stuff, all of that, right? But what I don't think companies are doing well right now when it comes to corporate social responsibility is asking themselves again, who are we? And what are the things that we stand for, right? And amplifying that, like Patagonia did. That's what I'm saying, and still honoring the current turbulence that all companies are going through whatever. I mean, right now it's recession talk. It's, there's all kinds of talk. There's always going to be talk. When the political season comes up, there's going to be that. There's a lot of noise. So a great company, a great brand, and leaders of great brands keep asking themselves, are we still being ourselves? Are we still being ourselves? Are we still investing in initiatives that further our vision and our values, right? And again, let's say you have an organization that doesn't care about any of that. Right. It would be off-brand for them to pretend like they care about it. And so I would say in those instances, if DEI is not important to a company, the Gen Chem, my personal stance on is that's crazy. And I would never buy from them because those are my personal values. But if I was putting just my corporate hat on, it would be inauthentic for them to do that.
Right.
Right. And so I'm not saying ethically or morally for me, that's right. But in terms of their brand, they have an audience that wants to buy that stuff. So it's our job, if we feel the opposite, to further our brand if we think the opposite. So these companies that are more what I'd say socially corporate responsibility, where that's important to them, when it comes to climate, when it comes to racial equity, when it comes to their stances on harassment, all the things,
human rights,
they got to be louder about it, because unfortunately we are also living in a very polarized world because of social media. And so it's very important for companies who are conscious, who believe in healing and fixing some of the injustices that are out there, to be more loud about it. And the first thing you should not be doing is firing the people that are in charge of those initiatives. So that's my take on it.
Yeah. Thanks for sharing that. What I heard you say, and it seems like everything keeps going back to, live your culture, your culture. Corporate responsibility is tied to your brand promise. Like, what is your brand promise? Go back and revisit that. Who are we? What do we stand for? And when you answer those questions, that should allow you to stand in your authenticity, whatever that is, whether that's in alignment with who I am and what I believe or not, stand in that and not, don't be the first to just run out and put out a statement. If you don't feel, because you're right, there were a lot of people that ran and put out statements, and there were a lot of people that just kind of sat back. And I think when you put out a statement, is this something that we really believe in, or are we just kind of going along?
Is it just a PR stunt? Is it just a PR stunt? It's a way to quiet and be a good guy or good gal brand out there. And it's like, it worked, hey Tanya, it worked for us, Xers and older. It was fine. We could live with that. the next generations, they are not, you talk about recruiting and talent and having, enrolling brand ambassadors, they're not going to get on board. And so we have to be, if we want to be smart about it and also obviously uphold our social commitments as a company, then we need to be thoughtful about that.
Yeah. Yeah.
They can smell fake a mile away.
Yes, they can. And they're getting out. They're not staying. They're not staying where they're not feeling valued. Right.
Correct.
You mentioned social media, and we can't talk about branding without talking about social media. What are some of the implications of social media on brands? I've had, some experiences with vendors, and, the first thing that you think about is, well, I'm going to make a post on social media, because that's the only way I'm going to get a response, or only way I'm going to get this issue handled. And so, what do leaders need to think about when they're thinking about social media and who they are and how they show up and their consumers? What would you tell them?
Well, I first want to point out that social media and traditional media are just mechanisms. They're not the messengers. Okay. We have to focus on the messengers if we want to be for a brand to truly communicate how they help people. And so this era is about going, if we're like the coolest brand on this particular social media, and it's true, a lot of brands have gone viral as a result of social media, but a lot of them also have gone out of business after they went viral because they didn't have the back end. They did not have the back of the brand sorted, right? And they didn't have mentors to help them with that. I think that's the other thing about, I know I'm talking about social media, but if you use social media as a method of marketing, and it's a very powerful method of marketing if you know how to message the brand promise, the brand, like how exciting the brand is, et cetera. But if you don't have a model for how to keep it together after you get that visibility, it all falls apart. It crumbles quickly. And unfortunately with social media, it's kind of like, I don't know if anybody ever watches Project Runway, but like Heidi Klum will say, one day you're in and the next day you're out, and that's what you have to be cognizant that social media is very temporary. Yet corporations are very scared because they're like, once something is out there, it's always there now because everything's in the cloud, right? So it's this thoughtfulness about what platforms do we care about? That's the other thing. Like, we shouldn't be on every platform. I don't believe that. I think we should be on the platform that serves our audience the best, right? And if we want to jump and test and have fun and try, like, let's say TikTok or something, and we're more of a services-based company, like, you think about it first is really my point. Because again, it's just a mechanism. What matters more is the messenger and the messages. And if we get clear on the messages and that inside our brand ambassadors are messengers of our brand, then whatever platform it's on doesn't really matter because then we have continuity. So I believe that social media is, it's important because it's not something that is going away ever. But it's still not as respected as traditional media. It's still not as respected. And so at the timing of this, I mean, who knows, 10 years from now, that could all change, right? But right now, as we're speaking, traditional media is still more highly respected. And so there's need to be a balance, is what I would say, and a thoughtfulness around it.
Yeah. Yeah. You said earlier, I don't know what's going to happen when we're not here. When we're not here, they can come back and listen to this podcast and hear the real deal.
Yes. And if they're thinking, how do we solve this people problem? I'm like, come listen to Tanya and Jen right here,
Yes, to listen to this podcast.
Get back to the foundation of human beings are here. Like at the end of the day, that's what we're dealing with. And we are extremely frustrating beings, right? So we got to figure it out. Technology is not going to solve that. Right. It's not going to solve our ability to interact and communicate and belong with each other. And that's still something, these are basic human needs. And it sounds like, what does that have to do with branding? What does that have to do with, finances? I'm like, it has everything to do with it. Because if you can find people who can get on board with you and see it that way, even when you screw up, that's seen as a win, right? So, and you said that earlier too. So,
yeah, I love it. I love that we started out saying, we're humans, we're gonna mess up, and when we think about how do I fix that mess up, right? Internally, the back end, right? So it doesn't affect what people see, because if the back end is what I call janky,
yes,
it's gonna affect what the people see. I've been dealing with that with the client now. We've been working together for a while, and internally, all of the internal stuff, people always want to say, well, the kids don't see that. They don't see what's going on. Okay, but it still shows up. It affects your brain.
It does.
Once some changes started taking place, everything just started to smooth out, Jen. And, they're starting to develop their unicorn team. I'm so excited for them.
Yes.
Because they can feel it now. They can feel it. They can see that things are starting to go through the storm. Because if they had not gone through that storm, their overall brand would have truly been affected. And so a lot of this that we're talking about, guys, I really want you to, come back, listen to this episode and think about where do I start, which is the next question I want to ask you. What advice do you have for leaders who are looking to, establish a brand for themselves? We need to go back and apply some of these things that Jen Kim's talked about. Like, where do they start? And before you answer that, I know that you have a free gift that'll be in our show notes page for our listeners. So I don't know if you want to incorporate that into where leaders start, but go ahead.
Okay, thank you. So first and foremost, a little bit of foundation. So number one, there are 3 types of brands that we need to be thinking about as leaders. There's the personal brand, the offer brand, and the company brand. And they actually need a little bit of different treatment. Okay. I think corporations, especially in today's times, back in the day, aging ourselves, to be a master brand, you just needed to spend money on the Super Bowl ads and be one of the big, everything came from what could you put in the New York Times? What was, advertising that way? And it was more about volume than it was about even results. Okay. It was more about volume. Nowadays, because of social media, there's so many options, there's so much competition. Interestingly, the company brand first is not as important as the personal offer brand. Before that was not true. Okay. But now in today's terms, if you look at a lot of C-level executives, for example, they've grown their personal brands. They have social media following, right? Yeah. Because they are brand ambassadors for their company, right? They're tooting the horn of how cool is our brand to buy from, to be in, all those things. So I do believe that if you're just starting out, I know you're thinking about your company, and that's good because you want to think about the values that we talked about earlier, what are your company values? What do you stand for? But before you do that, you better know yours first. So your personal brand as a founder or part of a founder's leadership team is, what are our individual values? And how does that tie into the ultimate value of our company? And a lot of times we've been doing it top down instead of bottoms up. Okay. Bottoms up meaning people to company versus company to people. So I would start with if I'm a founder, I'm starting something up, what's my brand? Who am I? Right. And it's funny again, because we think that personal brands are new, meaning, everybody's now building their personal brand. Y'all, I mentioned earlier, Steve Jobs and Sarah Blakely, they started those companies in the late 80s and the 90s. They were the personal brands for their companies. This is not new. Okay. But somehow we've made it the company has to hold all this pressure of being everything to everyone. And I think that I would focus on that. And then I would focus on your offers. And what I mean by offers, your product or your service, right? How are they actually creating results for clients? Because a brand becomes strengthened by the results of the people who consume them, right? And so getting your teams to operate under what I called earlier the visionizer, strategizer, and mobilizer structure, which is basically like, if you know where you sit in those three roles, you get better and better at that, and you line it up with your values. And so it starts with the personal brand. Its second is offer brand, and then third is corporate brand, because the offer and the personal brand create the company brand, right? That's the truth. The personal brands and the offers create the company. So that's where I would start. And it's a very different way of doing it than most people do it. But that's why, this is why I've been doing this work for like so long.
Well, I think it goes back to something you said in every interview. You ask people what are your values, right? And so you don't find out later, 3 years, 5 years down the line, that we really are not aligned. Like, we don't need to go together.
Yes.
So when you start with that and you create these, it's easier. It sounds like it's easier to create brand ambassadors or corporate ambassadors within the organization.
Yes. And it starts with the leadership team too, right? Because they're the models for the others.
You better say that again.
Right? It does. It starts with people who supervise, manage, and lead people. We have a responsibility to model that living your values is a good thing. And that if it isn't, it's the only reason it isn't is because it's not in alignment with the company values, and it's just not a good fit. Instead of it being about, oh, this person's a troublemaker. Oh, this person's a whistle. Oh, this person's a complainer. Like, you should have known that up front, and you didn't model up front in your hiring process because you didn't use that as one of the main reasons to hire people, So yeah, you got to model it. You got to be the model.
I love it, love it, love it. So Jen, tell us about these archetypes.
Okay, great. So back to like your personal brand, right?
Yes.
Your personal brand is all about obviously you and the way that you want to message yourself and the potency of the way that you communicate, right? And when I say potency, it doesn't have to be loud. It doesn't have to be disruptive. It can be it doesn't really matter how you communicate, but you do want to know where your voice can be more powerful. And so I have this assessment that I've been using for 20 years called the Brand Archetype Assessment. And it allows you to it's a psychological tool, which allows you to find out where the potency of your brand voice is as a personal brand first. And so, yes, I'm giving it as a gift to everyone here to be able to, you'll get these amazing reports once you take the assessment, and it's a real diagnostic. It's not some like clickbait type of quiz. I'm not trying to ask you what kind of Disney princess you want to be. Like, it really gets to the heart of the strength of your communication as a brand, personal brand. So I'm excited for you to take it. And if anybody does, please message me on LinkedIn or Instagram, where I like to communicate the most with people. Because, once you find out where your potency is, then you can architect your messaging around it. And that's what builds a personal brand ultimately. And then that contributes to the offers and the company brand. So that's what that is. Awesome.
And everyone will be getting that in the show notes page. So final question. This has been so good. I already know we're going to have to do a part 2. We talked about this before. Jen, what are you reading that we should be reading?
Okay, so I love this question because I am a geeky, nerdy girl, always have been. My happiest place is with a book and no one talking to me, just to let you know. So I do have some recommendations I think everyone should read.
Okay.
If you're a leader. Okay, the first is, I actually mentioned it earlier, which is The Values Factor by John DeMartini. Originals by Adam Grant. And Originals is a great way to look at how to build a personal offer and company brand. He doesn't think that's the book, but to me, when I read that book, I'm like, he's talking about those things, like how to be original. Purple Cow by Seth Godin. Perennial Seller by Ryan Holiday. and Principles by Ray Dalio. Those are like my top 5 books that I actually tell everybody to write. And I'll tell you a 6th is going to be Unicorn Team in 2025, because, you know, these 5 books, they're all written by white men, which is great. I love white men. If you're listening, I love you. I've got nothing against you. But these concepts that we've even been talking about today, Tanya, and the way that you consult your own clients, this needs to be told too, in relationship to what everybody reads. And these are 5 phenomenal books that I think are written with very good perspectives. They have diversity of thought and culture in mind. And so I just think it's like, that's the leadership handbook for everyone on their desk, those 5 books.
Yeah. We've got to start telling our stories and putting them out there. So I'm excited for hashtag Unicorn Teams out, because it's going to be great. I know a lot of the companies that I go in, it doesn't matter how much technology is out there, the people stuff is still going to be an issue for a lot of people, even with the virtual teams, hybrid workplaces. People want to know, how do I build a better team? How do I bring people together? How do I get the results? And so I believe that book is going to make an impact just in society, in the world of entrepreneurship. It's going to make an impact. So when I saw your post, I went back and I looked at it like twice. I read it twice. I was like, what's going on here? So
thanks for noticing.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. We've been chatting with Jennifer Kim, CEO of MasterBrand Institute. Jennifer has a special gift for you. So please visit the show notes to see how to connect with her and grab your free gift from her. While you're there, be sure to grab a copy of Results Driven Organizations, the 4 Keys to a High Performance Workplace. You can use the link in the show notes page and grab our special gift to you for being a valued listener. Until next time.
We hope you enjoyed this episode of Results Driven Organizations podcast with Dr. Tanya Lowe. Be sure to review the show notes for the resources mentioned, and don't forget to grab your free gift available at freegiftfromtanya.com. Until next time.